Won't you be part of the watch program?
The Crescent City of New Orleans. Beautiful shot from overhead the Superdome. Fans starting to pile into the parking lots in the area, getting ready for the Saints and the 49ers. More on the game in a bit. First, some of the news, notes, and quotes around the league this final Monday of November. The injury update from Dallas. The Cowboys are getting ready to visit Philly on Sunday. Troy Aikman says, check with me on Wednesday about the knee ligament sprain. He is moving much better than he was a week ago. As for Rodney Peete, his thumb has also improved, and Rodney thinks he'll be able to start Sunday. Both quarterbacks did throw today in practice. Bill Cowher, he's going back to Neil O'Donnell as the starter when the Central leading Steelers play Cincinnati. Of course, the Browns also tied for the AFC Central lead. And Mike Tomczak's won 2 games, but O'Donnell's leg injury has improved. Neil took half the snaps on Thursday and Friday. The Raiders coming off the loss to the Steelers. L.A. played half the game without Jeff Hostetler. Haas's migraine's not helped by a couple of hits to the head. He was tested at the hospital. Raiders expecting Haas to be okay for next week. Louis Oliver, who was outspoken about the Bengals' early season struggles, will miss the rest of this season with a cracked bone under his left kneecap. Remember a couple of weeks ago, Steve Broussard of the Bengals went out with a neck injury. He was assessing his football future. He left yesterday's game, but he was just having trouble catching his breath in the very cold air in Denver. As a matter of fact, Broussard led the team yesterday in rushing with 52 yards. Several NFL assistant coaches are in line for possibly some of those major college vacancies. Green Bay assistant Sherm Lewis interviewed for the Michigan State job last week. Chicago offensive coordinator Ron Turner is being mentioned for that now vacant head coaching job at Stanford. Carolina was supposed to meet with Joe Gibbs this week, but scheduling sticking points have delayed the meeting. Panthers still expecting a no from Gibbs. On the field, Webster Slaughter fined 1 week's pay today. That's just over $50,000. Slaughter made critical comments about his playing time and the team. Webster's unhappy because Gary Wellman is getting his playing time, and if Slaughter doesn't play in 78% of the Oilers' offensive plays, then Webster will lose nearly $900,000 in incentives. He popped off. Today, his coach fired back.
I was a little surprised and taken by his comments after the game, and as a result of that, I have decided to take the most dramatic measures I can at this point, and that is to fine Webster 1 game check and provide to him a letter which spells out the manner in which he is to go about finishing up the year from the standpoint of carrying himself publicly.
A postscript on this: if Slaughter violates the terms officially laid out, coach says, as he said, he can suspend the receiver for a game. As we told you last week, Steve Entman, herniated disc in his neck. He had his neck surgery today. Nice to see our fall ESPN2 college football colleague, Trev Alberts, making his NFL debut Sunday Night Football last night. Back from preseason elbow surgery with a sack and a pair of tackles, making the team quite happy, and Trev checked out okay after the game. The Steelers defense reminding you of the old Pittsburgh defense like Jack Lambert's days. Well, Greg Lloyd of the Steelers with a Lambert-like toothless look for the game yesterday. He had dinner Saturday night in L.A. before meeting the Raiders. He was out with a couple of teammates. Lloyd lost a tooth while eating a steak. Tough guy Lloyd pulled the tooth out himself. Steelers get a win with Mike Tomczak at quarterback. They go back to Neil O'Donnell. The quarterback situation in the AFC is up in the air. Nobody's going to pull a tooth out on their own for the next couple of minutes. Check them. Our Knights, the roundtable, join us. Skip Bayless from the Insider in Dallas, Mike Wilbon from the Washington Post, and the Joblin from the Detroit Free Press.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Well, something that made us smile with all our teeth. Dan Marino's performance in that game against the Jets yesterday. That fourth quarter alone was a thing of beauty, wasn't it?
No human has ever carried a team with less talent as far as Marino has carried his Dolphins. If any AFC quarterback has even a remote chance against Dallas or San Francisco in a Super Bowl, it's Marino with his magic and mystique.
I'll agree with that. Marino is completely fabulous, but he hasn't carried the team as far by himself as John Elway, has he?
Well, I disagree. I think Marino is right now that perfect blend of body and mind. His body can still get the job done. His arm is miraculous, but he can think the whole game through. That deception play in the fourth quarter is beautiful. But, you know, 3 sports writers who can't throw a football 30 yards collectively only gives you 1 point. Let's check with the quarterback. Phil, are quarterbacks as impressed with Dan Marino as sports writers and fans are?
How do the quarterbacks feel about Dan Marino? We bow to the king because he is the king of quarterbacks. Yes. All young quarterbacks come in the league, want to be like him, and I'll tell you what, all the older quarterbacks marvel at the way he can throw a football, and what sets him apart, confidence. No matter what the situation, he thinks he can overcome it in a game and still succeed.
I'm not about to disagree with my idol, Phil Simms.
Oh, thank you. But
No, it's not really a disagreement. The thing is, the team still, however, doesn't appear good enough to get to the playoffs, to get to the Super Bowl. I mean, every year we go through this with Miami and Marino. Fabulous games. They don't even make the playoffs 4 of the last 5 years. It reminds me a lot of Fouts, Kenny Anderson, Burt Jones. They can't get there.
well, AFC traditionally kind of has that thing with quarterbacks, but this year what's unique about them is the teams that are doing the best don't really have the star quarterbacks either. I mean, you've got Pittsburgh and O'Donnell. He's played a couple of playoff games.
Yeah.
Humphreys in San Diego, barely any playoff games, if any. Testaverde with Cleveland. He's still waiting to win his first big game.
Well, and speaking of that, ironically, the best of the rest of the AFC quarterbacks, the one proven winner is Mark Rippon, and Bill Belichick, once again, flexing his authority in Cleveland. I think he's making a mistake, is going with Vinny Testaverde over Mark Rippon.
I can't believe the name that you guys have left out. I'm going to assume you just sort of forgot. Remember a guy named John Elway, sort of the Michael Jordan of the NFL, guy that's seen the Super Bowl 3 times? They're going to win enough games to go 9-7 and get to the AFC title game, Mitch. I told you this. Week 1, I told you this.
Stock. You must have it. This is the same Denver team that almost lost to Cincinnati, the lowly Bengals. They needed a fumble to escape
Cowboys
that yesterday.
that.
Look, I salute the nice comeback the Broncos have done, and now I say arrivederci comeback because they're done. They got to play 3 games on the road over the course of next week. They play San Francisco, Kansas City, and the Raiders as well. They're done. They're
They're going to
history.
be Kansas City this week.
All right, guys.
Kansas City.
Speaking of Kansas City, at age 38, Joe Montana is hurt once again. Should he hang him up after this season?
Well, the coaching staff hadn't betrayed Joe Montana by trying to make him Cal Ripken at 38 years old.
I'll buy that.
Start him 10 to 12 times. Didn't we get that promise at the beginning of the year,
Yes, we
Skip?
did.
They were going to start for him and keep him healthy. If this guy stays healthy, he doesn't need to retire. He can play another year or
They
2.
won't be able to resist that. They're going to milk whoever has Montana is going to milk him for the ticket value, and they're going to milk the legend right out of him. Now, I don't have the right as a sports writer to tell anybody what to do with their job, but as a fan, I would say I would prefer if Joe
come on.
Montana
That's
would
ridiculous.
go off into the sunset with his glory after this year is over, because the more he continues to play, the more he sort of dissipates that legend. That's the truth about
You're
fandom.
really overreacting right now. He doesn't have a healthy offense around him. He doesn't have Marcus Allen. He can't throw to Willie Davis. He doesn't have Keith Cash. He doesn't have John Alt protecting him right now. This is a system quarterback who's being asked right now to do what Dan Marino does in Miami.
He doesn't have time to wait until all those guys
he
are
might
healthy.
play 5 more years for all you
Yeah,
know.
If he plays 5 more years, it'll be on his knees.
He had time in Houston last year in the playoffs when he turned in the best quarterback playoff performance
He
last
might
year. He's in the
enhance his
playoffs.
legend after this year.
I seriously doubt it. It happens in sports all the time. We'll come back and debate some other topics later on in the second roundtable with our teeth.
With your teeth all in check, unlike Mr. Lloyd. Guys, thanks. Montana's old team, Niners playing tonight. We'll ask Lynn Swan about, do they need a running game to get into the playoffs and be successful throughout the playoff season? And downtown Julie Brown, backstage a little bit later with Ken Norton Jr. talking about his first game against the Cowboys.
I want to make sure that they knew what they lost, or remember what they lost when I left that team.
George Seifert, he has the best 100-game coaching record in NFL history, better than Lombardi, Shula, and Knoll and Landry. What an impressive start for George Seifert. The second 100 starts against New Orleans. Lynn Swan there for ABC, working the sidelines tonight. Lynn, in terms of the 49ers, we talk about them now in terms of getting home field since they beat the Cowboys head-to-head. Is there a danger of always playing a second team every week in terms of the Cowboys being out there?
No, I don't think so, because that home field advantage is something that's a goal at the end of the season. And to get that goal, to reach it, you have to play one game at a time. You have to beat the Saints here and beat everybody else on the schedule to achieve it.
You know, we talk about the San Francisco offense, and their passing game is outstanding. Their rushing game hasn't been terrific this year. Do they need to establish a rushing game as they head towards the playoffs?
Oh, they absolutely do. Ricky Wallace has got to carry the ball more for San Francisco. You know, the first time they played New Orleans, he did not have a great game against them. They had to put the ball in the air the entire time. Steve Young threw 39 passes against the Saints when they were in San Francisco. Now, that ties him for the second most passes in any one game this year. And he can't live on that all the time. We know how talented he is in throwing the football. We know how talented Jerry Rice is. But to make it through the rest of the season, to do well in the playoffs, they've got to be able to establish more of a run and not have to carry the weight on his shoulder game after game after game.
In that first game, Jim Everett threw over 50 times, and what's become remarkable about his story this year, Lynn, Everett is having some sort of success without a running game on the Saints offensive side.
Well, people forgot that Jim Everett is a very talented passer. He has an arm. They kept looking at this man as being so inconsistent, not living up to his potential when he was with the Rams, but he's certainly very capable. The Saints still have to establish a running game on their side also, but he's proven He can carry the team on his arm, and he may have to do that tonight against the San Francisco 49ers.
We'll see what happens with you, Al, Frank, and Dan at the top of the hour. Swanee, thanks. Coming up, Phil Jaws, TJ add their analysis to yesterday's scores, including why Marino's throws are so tough on defensive backs. More close games yesterday, guys. 8 games yesterday decided by 7 or less, a couple in overtime, 14 OT games this year. What's the record, you ask? 19 is the record, 11 years ago. Could get there, so 4 weeks and much more football ahead. QB3, Joe still on assignment, so our third quarterback sacked.
Oh, there he is. Still got no helmet.
That's right for you. We got to put your helmet on, Tommy. Smart linebacker. Ron Jaworski joins us as well. Tell you one thing the Jets couldn't do yesterday in the second half, get a sack on Dan Marino. Quick release, good protection by the offensive line. Marino was outstanding again.
Hard to sack him. Dan Marino was out there again yesterday, giving all the quarterbacks around the National Football League a lesson on how to throw the football against tight man coverage. You'll see him yesterday against the Jets. Drops back, the defender's back to him, fires it over his head before the defender can react. 2-point conversion, those hand signals by the Dolphins. Throws it again, hard and over the top of the head of the defender where he cannot see the ball and react. It's too late. Late in the game, now the defender's ready for this maybe, Tom. What's he do? He throws it behind Mark Ingram on purpose for the touchdown to win the game. Mark Ingram, an ex-teammate of mine, 4 touchdown catches yesterday, said when he went down with the Dolphins, the hardest thing to learn about this passing offense was all the hand signals that Dan Marino gives to you, and you're expected to know.
Yeah, well, he's comfortable down there. Now, another quarterback trying to get comfortable, Vinny Testaverde. For a month, Bill Belichick has been trying to get Vinny to forget about the hits in the head and start throwing the football. As we take a look at him here early in the game, you can see his timing was off. He wasn't real comfortable with the pressure there. Leroy Horde on the swing pass, he missed it. But look in the red zone here. Look at the time he has to throw the football. I think as you watched him yesterday get comfortable throwing that ball, you realize he's going to be a plus down the stretch. And this Cleveland team is a team with all the other parts offensively in place, Ron.
You know, Tom, another quarterback playing very well is Jeff George down that run-and-shoot offense down in Atlanta. And June Jones has him playing very well and moving the ball around at different receivers. Here you see him step back, throw the quick fade over here to Andre Rison, back in action, beating All-Pro Eric Allen on a very tough throw. Greg Jackson doesn't get over to make the play. Here dropping back again, and you just don't throw the football any better than this down the middle. Terrence Mathis with that man coverage up the middle and 2 safeties deep, and Jeff George sticks the ball in there. And for years, I have bashed the run-and-shoot offense, but I was down with the Atlanta coaches, June Jones and Miles Davis, on Saturday, and they convinced me that it could be a great offense. And then I went out and watched Jeff George perform on Sunday, and they dominated the Eagles. They had people wide open all over the place. In the third quarter, Jeff George threw for 217 yards. They controlled the ball for 13 and a half minutes. I was convinced the run and shoot is a good offense. But what convinced me more of that, and Phil, you'll love this, our colleague Joe Theisen was down there last year at training camp, and he ran that offense. And he threw a touchdown pass in practice. If Joe can throw a touchdown pass, anybody can. It's got to be a good offense, Phil.
I can't believe he did, Jaws, but also I can't believe you're saying that. You flip-flop more than Bill Clinton does. I mean, run and shoot. You know what? They were lucky they weren't playing the Pittsburgh Steelers defense yesterday, because I tell you what, they can stop any offense. The way they run around, look at here, Kevin Green hitting the runner in the backfield. They are so physical. If you drop back the pass, the pass rush, here you see Chad Brown coming through, hitting the quarterback. This defense can come out and hit you hard for 60 minutes like no other defense in the NFL. Even with the Raiders, with all that speed, they weren't scared of the blitz and getting burned by the Raiders' speed. They still keep coming after you, Tom.
Physical on both sides of the football, and I love the commitment of Bill Cowher to the running game. Early in the game yesterday against the Raiders, not having success, but he keeps pouring it on. Barry Foster right here, then a little bit of Bam Morris. These runs started to work in the fourth quarter, and with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Bill Cowher knows that if you have a good, solid running game, you've got a large part of that championship puzzle solved.
Tom, you talked about the commitment to the running game of the Steelers. I'm going to talk about the lack of commitment to the running game of the Philadelphia Eagles. They're not running the football, but they did at the beginning of the third quarter. Hand off to Herschel Walker off the right side. Broderick Thompson, big block, 91 yards. The longest run in the history of the Philadelphia Eagles, surpassing Wilbur Montgomery's 90-yarder back in 1982. How did they reward Herschel Walker after that 91-yard touchdown run? They gave him the ball 2 more times. You take away that run, the Eagles run the ball 13 times for 24 yards.
no conviction to the running game, and to win in the NFC East, you got to run the football, Phil.
Well, you're right. You do have to run the football, but let's go back to quarterbacks again. Let's talk about Dave Brown. We got to give him some pointers on how to be a successful quarterback in the NFL. Yesterday against the Redskins, look at this. Play action. Throw it to Kenyon Rashid right there. Get the touchdown pass. Pad those stats. Touchdown passes are precious. But look at him later like a veteran. He throws the touchdown pass to Chris Callaway. Look what he does after the play. Just like a good veteran quarterback. Who's he congratulate? The referee. That's it. Give me some skin on that throw. The referee does. Tom White gives him a little skin. Why do you do that? Hey, later in the game, one of those big old ugly defensive linemen come in, might hit you. You might get a call for a late hit. You never knew there was so much to playing quarterback, did you, Mike?
You're serious?
Not a little thing. You know what? I really am serious.
Oh, he's dead serious.
Working the officials, working the refs.
You got to do it all. Whatever it takes to win football games, remember.
199 touchdown passes in your career.
199.
That's how much you padded the stats.
I tried any time I could.
No, you couldn't run it in. You're quick enough to run it in, right?
That's the point. There you go.
Hey, this weekend we saw Florida State's 28-point comeback to tie. The 49ers have the greatest NFL regular season comeback ever, 28 points. Chris Berman will relive it for us in our distant replay. That's later in the show. Next, backstage, downtown Julie Brown, Ken Norton Jr., talking about the relationship with Ken's dad.
It's really a shame. I'm in my prime right now, and it's something that we really should be sharing this together.
And Terrence Mathis joins us now from the Falcons headquarters. Terrence, I know we didn't expect it. Did you expect to be in the same breath as Chris Carter, a chance on pace to break Sterling Sharp's all-time reception record this year?
No, I didn't. Actually, my job was to come here and just to help this team get to the playoffs and take some pressure off of Andre. And it seems like, right now I'm having fun doing what I'm doing, getting an opportunity to make plays, and I'm loving every minute of it.
It was all Andre, especially those first 2 weeks. Have you been the beneficiary of teams really trying to take Andre out of the offense?
Well, actually, I think it has been that way, early in the year. But actually, I'm starting to get open, feeling more confidence with the offense, and Jeff feeling more confident with me, and I'm getting more plays called for me, and I'm making the best out of them.
You mentioned Andre Rison. That's been such a big story around the Falcons for several weeks, him being late, suspended for one game a couple of weeks ago, back last week. As a team, how much of that distraction can carry on to the field on a game day?
Well, it is distracting, but you got to remember we're professionals, and we're men also, so you have to go out there and do your job regardless who's there and who's not. And that's the approach I have taken, and that's the approach a lot of guys have taken.
From a football standpoint, how is it different having him on the field in yesterday's win over the Eagles?
Well, actually, now people, you have guys making plays, and then when you have an all-pro player out there making plays also, now it makes it more difficult for a defense to defend us.
You were talking about your days with the New York Jets before we started taping our interview. Go back to your Jet days for a minute. You had a couple of key drops, some tough plays on kick coverages, punt returns. How did you really start to turn things around once you got down to Atlanta and get the past behind you?
Well, actually, my first 2 years with the Jets, I was basically a return guy, and I was getting more confidence with it. My third year, they took me off and put me in sparingly. And my fourth year, I was just in, at spot times, and it was difficult for me to come in third and fourth quarter of games and to return a punt. And, I guess they lost confidence in me in that area, but, basically I'm a receiver, and that's all I want to do is play offense and make some plays. And coming to Atlanta, right away, I felt like this was a home for me because they treated me well, and they told me I was going to get opportunity to make plays, and that's all I ever wanted was opportunity to make plays.
6-6, 4 games left. You have San Francisco next week. I know you'll be watching them tonight a little bit. Are the playoffs a reality for the Falcons?
Yes, it is. We control our own destiny right now. All we have to do is win games. Right now, we're in a playoff atmosphere right now, and we need to win games. We can't afford to lose too many, and we can't worry about what everybody else is doing in the NFC. We just got to win games and try to solidify our playoff spot.
Well, congratulations on the great numbers. Terrence, good luck.
Thank you very much.
Terrence Mathis earlier with us from Georgia. Ron Jaworski joins us live now from NFL Films. Jaws, you were down there, saw Mathis in person play yesterday. Did you come away impressed?
I came away very impressed, Mike, and the one thing that really stood out to me was his toughness. And he plays that slot position in the run and shoot. That means he's going to catch balls over the middle where linebackers and safeties are. And you have to concentrate on catching the ball because you're going to get hit. So he is a tough guy, but he's also intelligent. In the run and shoot, you got to read on the run, and he's able to do that. I tell you, I left there very impressed, not only with Mathis, but all their receivers.
The reading on the run makes it sound like a complex offense. Compare it in playbook in terms of preparation for a quarterback or a receiver to like the 49ers offense that we'll see tonight.
Totally different. I was amazed after meeting with June Jones and Miles Davis to find out that they really only have 6 or 7 basic offensive plays in their game plan every week. You put that with 6 or 7 runs, they got 14, 16 plays every week. That's all they use. But what they do is they do it very well. They option run their routes. They may have an out call. The defense dictates something. They may go to the post, and they may run the go pattern. So it's an offense that's not real fancy as far as their play selection, but it's an adjustment offense. And, boy, yes, they look terrific.
And next week they play San Francisco. When they played San Francisco in the Georgia Dome, Dion said it was in his house. This one's at Candlestick. What is that, his fall condo? The Georgia Dome is his house. A little bit later, we're going to go back to New Orleans. Chris Myers chats with the Saints coach, Jim Moore. Next week, another big game. Chiefs play Denver. We'll relive their first game through Shannon Sharp.
We need another receiver, John! John, we need another receiver!
UCLA as a coach, then he came this year to Colorado. I tell you what he did. He went in there, he really refined Cordell Stewart, made him a top-notch quarterback. I think they had to be impressed with that. They expect him to do that with the team, and I think that's why he was hired.
Some folks around college football are going to be surprised that they decided to go with a young guy, but New Heisel, the new coach for the Colorado Bucks. And you'll hear more about that on SportsCenter coming up at 11:30 Eastern, or tune over after the game. Coming back, our roundtable, we'll talk about Andre Rison. There you see Ricky Jackson, ready to play against his old team, the New Orleans Saints. He's a 49er now. Orleans, only some strange sights in New Orleans. Look at that. That is an alligator. Isn't that unbelievable? Well, you go to New Orleans, you never know what you're going to see, Phil. Nah, never mind. I don't want you to say anything, to be honest. Of course, you're in the swamp. You walk down Bourbon Street, find some of those voodoo sayers, believers. Steve Young, some pins and a voodoo doll of Jim Everett. Don't know if he needs to do that, and Niners just go out and take care of their own business. They'll have some success. You know, the Niners, for the last few years, have gotten off to great starts and really collapsed in the second half of the year. What about the collapsing teams of this year? Our Knights of the Round Table are back, and here's Mike.
Thanks a lot, Mike. You know, it's one of the truisms of television that what you say on tape today, you may live to regret tomorrow. And over the last few weeks on this show, at some point or another, we've talked about Philadelphia, Minnesota, Buffalo. We've had them in the Super Bowl at one point or another. Now,
maybe you.
And now, they may not make the playoffs.
I'll tell you what, I didn't have Philly in anybody's Super Bowl because they do this every year. A couple of years ago, they started off 4-0. A few weeks later, you look up, they're 4-4. He was vintage Philly was yesterday. Herschel Walker on his first or second carry of the game. He goes 91 yards for a touchdown. He carries 3 times the entire game.
Exactly. Michael, the real problem here is Richie Kotite, who I think is the most overrated, overhyped coach in the National Football League. And by the way, the new owner, Jeffrey Lurie, knows this, which is why 3 weeks ago he did not give him a contract extension. Now this team has lost all faith, or what it had left, in Richie Kotite to begin with.
I don't know. It seems like when Philly's winning, we sing the praises of Kotite and Randall Cunningham. They're the greatest combination. And when they lose, they can't get the job done. To me, the bigger surprise is the Minnesota Vikings. I don't get this at all. They were in the driver's seat. They had a 2-game lead in the NFC Central. They were at home against the Jets and Tampa Bay, and they lose to both those teams. Now they're in danger of potentially not making the playoffs. Moon is suddenly throwing interceptions. They can't tackle a quarterback. If you lose at home to Tampa Bay, you have no excuse.
The Minnesota, unlike Philly, is a true mystery because Minnesota wasn't just doing things to get you to the playoffs. They were doing things that had us all guessing that they were as good as either the 49ers or the Cowboys. They were stopping the run. They were scoring. They were running the ball. They had good quarterback play for the first time in years.
Wait a second, though. Speaking of quarterback play, Warren Moon, by the way, has always been a very hot and very cold quarterback. He's very cold right now. He'll be very hot again. This team has to learn to win. It's a new team, learn to win around Warren Moon.
Whatever's wrong with Minnesota, it appears to be pretty complex. There's still a bigger mystery than the Buffalo Bills. And Buffalo has put itself in this position after 4 straight Super Bowl runs where if they don't win Sunday night in Miami, they're going to be 6-7, and I don't see how you can think they're going to go to the playoffs.
Yeah, speaking of that game, by the way, this is the playoff game, the first playoff game for the Buffalo Bills. And if they manage to sneak out there with a win, I don't think they're dead just yet.
I agree with you.
What did you spend all day Thursday eating? Did you not watch the game when they played against Detroit? They're a nice team. They try hard. They're out of gas. They're a car that just doesn't have it anymore. They are not going to even make the playoffs. Forget about Buffalo. It's a thing of the past.
Drop that. Tape in a few weeks.
Yeah. Speaking of teams who have collapsed, let's talk about the Houston Oilers. And you just heard here earlier on the show, Webster Slaughter. could be fined $50,000, will be fined, and probably will be suspended because he signed a deal last June 6th in which he agreed, as the leading receiver from last year's Oilers when they won 11 in a row, to take the bare minimum, $162,000. And now he's saying that, hey, he took all these incentives that could get him to $2 million, and they're starting to pull him out of games. I think he's the first salary cap victim that we've seen, and I have sympathy for
All right, this
guy.
kind of situation, now you got to be careful with this. It depends on which way you look at it. It was like that Jack Morris situation in baseball. Remember when he needed about 7 or 8 innings to make his bonus, and they suddenly cut him, and they said, well, it was because of his behavior, but he said it was because they're trying to save money. If you look at it from the coach's perspective, here's a new coach down here, Jeff Fisher. He's trying to get control of the team. He's got a guy who's coming out and saying, I don't want to play here anymore. He's complaining. He takes disciplinary action. It all depends on which angle you want to look at this.
Yeah, mine is look at it as another defensive coach who has no idea what to do with the wide receivers. He's an 80 on a guy's chest, doesn't know what to do, much like his old Boston mentor, Buddy Ryan, who cut Chris Carter once upon a time.
And by the way, Webster Slaughter is a real hard-working guy. This is all about principle. We are not talking about Andre Rison here.
All right, well, it's interesting how the coaches seem to have different boiling points because June Jones waited until midseason when he missed, what, Andre missed 19 sessions, and then he benched him, and Jeff Fisher just needed 2 weeks, so. And we're all benched here. Back to you, Mike.
Mitch, thanks. Coming up, back to the Superdome, Chris Myers talks with Saints coach Jim Mora. Deion Sanders, one of the guys Jim's offense has to be concerned about. 3 INTs in 9 games as a 49er. Jim Mora's teams got off to great starts, but over the last 22 games, they have struggled. Still, it's a rebuilding process for Jim Mora, who's with Chris.
All right, thanks very much, Mike. We're with the most successful Saints coach in history, Jim Mora. In your 9th season, haven't had a losing season since your first year, but Jim, this season at 4-7, it's been no Mardi Gras, I know that. As you approach this game tonight with the 49ers for your team, is this your playoff game?
Well, I don't know about that. You know, we've struggled this year. It's been a rough year, but we made a lot of changes in the offseason, and this team has improved a lot over the course of the season. We start we make a good push, and then we kind of have a temporary setback. You know, we had one last week against the Raiders, but hopefully we'll come out tonight and play like we're capable of playing. It's a young team and a team that's really worked hard, and I like these guys. They're doing good, and we're going to play good tonight.
I know that you want to get the running game going. Your team ranked last in that area coming in, but Bates is a little bit healthier now, and is he starting? I mean, he is starting. Is he going to get the ball out in this game, at least going in?
We'd like to. We'd like to think that. If we can keep it close or get a little bit of a lead, and we're having some success running the football, then we'll keep giving it to Mario. Unfortunately, in games this year, we've gotten behind early, and we haven't been able to keep the running game going. But if we can tonight, it's going to help us a lot.
Steve Young, you have to stop him, and there's a lot of elements of that offense to stop. And Steve Sidwell said you can't over-concern yourself with him, but that's where it starts. You gamble with a blitz, they cover the blitz or protect it as well as anybody. So what is your approach with a guy that moves as well as he does and has the weapons that he has?
Well, you know, you've got to play almost, you know, perfect defense against these guys, and even sometimes when you're playing perfect defense, they have the ability and the efficiency to still be successful. We don't spend a lot of time, you know, coming up with the elaborate game plans for Young to take away his scrambling and all that kind of stuff, but our players are certainly aware of it. They played against him a lot. They know what he can do and what they have to take away, and we emphasize that during practice and go out and play the game.
When you played them earlier in the year, they were beat up in the offensive line. It was a tight game, moving in for what could have been maybe the winning score, and then Deion Sanders runs back the pick, a guy that the Saints tried to sign, and I know you talked about what a great player he is. When he went to the Niners in the division, I mean, the ultimate slap in the face. I mean, how did that change the balance of things in your eyes trying to win this division?
Well, he's a great player, and by getting him, it helped him out in 2 positions, helped him out greatly because when they got him, they lined him up at right corner and took Merton Hanks to the right corner and put him at free safety. And Merton's a great player at free safety, so not only did it help him at right corner by getting Deion, it helped him at 2 positions, and it really has made their secondary an outstanding secondary with McDonald and Davis over there at the other side.
All right, well, thanks for your time. Good luck tonight and the rest of the season.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Jim Mora of the Saints. Let's get back to Mike in the studio. Chris, thank you. You know, when the Saints were doing well, people said, Saints, they can't win a playoff game, and they didn't because they're too conservative on offense.
Yeah, all they did was win, and everybody was always complaining they're too conservative. Well, what do you say now? All they do is throw the football. Jim Everett's having a heck of a year, and you got to give credit to Jim Mora adjusting to his talent. On defense, they used to be a base defense, never blitz. This year, they're blitzing, sending corners, sending safeties. He kind of reminds me of Bill Parcells. He's doing whatever it takes to win football games.
Well, you look at some of that talent that they lost defensively, especially up front. Ricky Jackson, Pat Swilling, Von Johnson out of that linebacking core. They dismantled that front 7. The right side of that defense now anchored by 2 rookies, Winfred Tubbs and Joe Johnson from
Louisville.
And I know that Coach Mora does not want to make excuses, but it takes time to develop young talent.
But he's developed very well, hasn't he? Young talent,
just like one of those dummies. I just
More on that defense of the Saints coming up in a bit. Chris Berman joins us in a few. Tonight's Distant Replay, looking back at the Niners-Saints 1980 game. It's still in the record book. Next, how can the Saints stop this? Young to Rice. Jaws takes a look at tonight's playbook.
Whiz, hot shot. There's a bomb on a bus. If it drops below 50 miles an hour, it blows up. What do you do?
Pass tonight. It'll be 139 straight games. He's third on the all-time list in receptions with 781 and receiving yards with 12,805 receiving yards. And do you think he likes the Monday night lights? Averaging 6 catches a game, nearly a touchdown per Monday night game, and just under 100 yards per Monday night football appearance. Some more amazing numbers. As Tommy was saying, there was a time when the Saints defense was among the most feared in the league, but now this is where the New Orleans team is rebuilding. Ron Jaworski reopens the playbook, checking out what they can do against the top offense in the NFL.
Mike, the Saints secondary is a very poor man-to-man coverage team. Therefore, they're forced to play a lot of zone so that coverage weakness can't be exploited.
The Saints' tactical approach against the 49ers in their first game was the right one. Their 3 down linemen and linebacker Reynaldo Turnbull providing the pass rush, while their 3 linebackers and 4 defensive backs play combination coverages behind the rush. This is your best percentage shot against San Francisco. You don't want to burden your corners by asking them to play a lot of man coverage against Rice at the top of the screen and Taylor here in the slot. Few corners can handle that matchup, and the Saints' Carl Lee and Jimmy Spencer would be overmatched. The hat must be worn by the 4 pass rushers. They have to generate consistent pressure on Steve Young. It's not about sacks, it's about taking Steve out of his comfort zone in the pocket. Here, Rice will run a deep post. That's Young's first look. The deep safety, Vince Buck, will take that away. Steve's next look is Taylor on the crossing route behind the Saints linebackers. From the end zone camera, you get a better angle. The timing of the play calls for the ball to be delivered right here, to this spot. But look at the other safety, Sean Lumpkin. If the ball is thrown on timing, Lumpkin will be in position to pick it off. You can see from the sideline angle that the design and execution of the defense has taken away the combination routes run by Rice and Taylor. But there's no pressure on Young. He can wait an extra half a second, a huge amount of time, before delivering to Taylor all the way across the field. The zone coverage scheme was successful. It was the pass rush that didn't do the job. Tonight, the Saints must get pressure on Young without sacrificing coverage.
For the Saints to have a chance tonight, they're going to have to find a way to put some quick pressure on Steve Young. In the first game, he had his way attacking that soft zone coverage. And, Phil, I know it's a real gamble when you've got those weak corners, but I think the Saints are going to have to pick up their blitz tempo tonight.
Yeah, you might be right, Ron. Let's remember, the first time these two teams played, the San Francisco 49ers offensive line was beat up. Tonight it's healthy, and you know what? I've talked to 49er coaches and players, and they tell me Steve Young is having his best year ever by far, and that's a pretty scary thought, especially if you play defense for the New Orleans Saints.
Well, I think the concern of that 49er offense is that offensive line run blocking, not so much pass blocking. The first time the two teams met, 19 carries, 74 yards, running the football. They're not concerned with the Saints. They're concerned with winning the championship. They have to run the ball better, specifically their wide game.
Ricky Watters running well, but only 619 yards this season. That stat surprises us. Coming up, Distant Replay, we will look back at one of the first Montana comebacks when Joe and the Niners were down 28 to the Saints at the break.
You jerk. I never want to see you again. Oh!
All better. They have Mario Bates back from his broken jaw that was wired shut after a teammate punched him in a bar after week 2 of the season. Bates coming off his best game, 14 carries, 48 yards. Tommy said Ken Norton Jr. big on that defense and trying to stop the rushing attack of the Saints. Time for Distant Replay. Here's Chris.
All right, Michael, thank you. Wanted to brighten up the festivities on Bourbon Street just a little bit more than you guys have already tonight. Comebacks. Joe Montana, the 49ers, kind of synonymous with it. But when Joe Montana's huge comeback and his pass to Dwight Clark for the catch in the 81 title game felled the Dallas Cowboys, not only the 49ers rid themselves of an ancient rival, the Cowboys, who had tortured them during the years, but they also did something that was usually done to them. They actually came back, because in some of the biggest games in previous 49ers history, the 49ers were on the wrong end of a miracle. December 22nd, 1957, the Lions and Niners faced off for the Western Conference title at San Francisco's Kezar Stadium in a special playoff game. The Niners jumped out to a seemingly insurmountable lead behind Yelbert and Abraham Tittle's passing and the magical moves of Hurry and Hugh McElhaney. McElhaney's 71-yard run early in the third quarter set up a field goal, which gave the Niners a 27-7 lead. But then the Niners became cautious and sloppy, and the Lions started to roar. Running back Tom the Bomb Tracy led a furious 24-point comeback, and Detroit shocked San Francisco 31-27 to move on to the title game. It stood as the biggest playoff comeback in NFL history until the Oilers-Bills game in 1992. Fast forward, if you will, to December 23rd, 1972. Niners' new home at Candlestick Park. The Niners lead the Cowboys 28-13 in the third quarter of a first-round playoff game. Tom Landry pulls Craig Morton for Roger Staubach. Staubach leads the Cowboys on one of his soon-to-be famous charges, cutting the Niners' lead to 28-23 with a minute to go. The Niners knew an onside kick was coming. The kicker, Tony Fritsch, got them with an old soccer move, the old scissors kick. Fooled the Niners coverage. The ball squirted loose. Mel Renfro recovered for the boys. That was all Roger the Dodger needed. He hit Ron Sellers with the winning score, and the Cowboys pulled out a miracle 30-28 finish. Now, having seen these games, you know why the catch kind of exercised all the demons for the San Francisco 49ers. That, of course, was in the 81 NFC title game. But the legend of Joe Montana, Bill Walsh, and the Cardiac Niners really began the year before. Joe's second year out of Notre Dame, where, of course, in college, he had quite a reputation for bringing the Irish back. But could he do it in the pros?
Two teams that had fallen over the edge of the 1980 season met in Week 14. The 49ers were 5-8. The Saints were a miserable 0-13.
What we were fighting toward the end of the season was not to get to the playoffs and not to have a winning season. Let's just win a game. Let's just win one football game. The Saints that year were the Aints. Everyone was wearing those bags, and even though we weren't very good, we kind of went into that game thinking we should be victorious here, and we just overlooked them a little bit.
In the first half of that game, New Orleans had a group of outstanding offensive players, and they just took our very average defense apart.
Defense couldn't stop them. Archie Manning was having his way with it.
It was probably the most dominating half of football that I've ever been involved in. Montana was completely befuddled by what we were doing on defense, and he would hesitate when he was throwing the ball.
The 49ers made a total of 21 yards in the first half. The only score that they made in the first half was Freddie Solomon ran a punt back for a touchdown. The score was 21-0 New Orleans at the time.
But the Saints responded with two more touchdowns to build a 28-point lead at halftime.
When the half ended, there wasn't much enthusiasm or much hope in Candlestick Park.
The only thing I was able to talk to our team about was the Saints could self-destruct. There'll be a relaxation, they'll have a lapse, they'll lose their concentration. They could self-destruct.
At halftime, the last thing the defensive coaches told us is to remember no long plays. You know, just let them have the short ones. We're up 35-7. And wouldn't you know it, the first play of the second half, Montana hit Clark for about 40 yards. And you can almost feel the bubble burst on that one play.
A quarterback sneak capped San Francisco's first scoring drive of the game. Then, less than 3 minutes later, the Montana-Clark connection clicked in a big way.
Montana back to throw. Big rush put on. He throws. He completes it underneath to Dwight Clark. He's the 40, the 45. He's the 50. He goes to the 40. It's a foot race. The 30. The 10. The 5. Touchdown, 49ers.
That may be the one play that'll wake up the 49ers.
Once you get within 2 touchdowns, that's not such an insurmountable thing to overcome. And I remember the excitement level was, wow, you know, we're back in this thing. Then the defense just kept stopping them, and it was like 2 totally different teams, first half and second half.
In football, when you're coming back on somebody like that, there's almost a physical sense you can get from an opponent where they're being kind of submissive, especially if after they've dominated you so much, and you really have that feeling from the Saints.
The deflated Saints submitted to the determined running of veteran Lenville Elliott, number 35, and the methodical passing of Montana.
Back to throw Montana. He's being rushed. Look out. He throws. He has Solomon open at the 5. Breaks the tackle. Goes the outside. Touchdown, 49ers. And it looked like that one wasn't going anyplace.
Once we got within a touchdown, we basically had the attitude that it was over. That the last thing they wanted to do, the biggest nightmare they could ever have for themselves, would be to let us tie the game.
With less than 2 minutes remaining to play in the 4th period, Elliott sent the contest into overtime.
Elliott trying to find some room. He does. He goes in for the touchdown. Oh, Elliott put on a brilliant move at about the 6-yard line. Well, I said at the start of the second half, this was either going to be one of the greatest stories in 49er history or a very terrible football game. It is approaching being one of the great stories.
This great story had a dramatic conclusion.
Between 30 and 39 yards, Worshing has missed just one. This will be just outside the 25. Montana to place the ball down. It is high, placed down. It's kicked. It is long enough. It is good! Ray Worshing with the greatest comeback the 49ers have made as they win it by a score of 38-35.
That game indicated to us that we could be resourceful, and we did have character, and we could believe in each other. So I believe our come-from-behind game against the Saints was a major turning point, because the next year, of course, we won the World Championship.
For New Orleans, the future wasn't quite as promising.
It was not an easy locker room to be in. I don't even think the coaches said anything. We just got dressed, and we got on the bus, and we went back home like beaten dogs, you know.
Distant Replay is brought to you by Dodge. The more things change, the more things look like the new Dodge.
Is that the first of many Montana comebacks? Were any of you victims of Montana comebacks, Tommy?
Never lost to him. How about you, Phil? Well, don't worry. The Broncos made up for it, Tommy. I lost to him quite a few times. I think about 5 times I lost to Joe. 1988, late in the game, we scored a touchdown. They're beating us up all day. Right. I think we got the game won. It's 3rd and 15. He drops back, throws it down the right sideline. Our corner and safety run together. 80-some-yard touchdown. Of course, we lost.
You had some success again.
Yes, we beat them a few times.
All right. Will there be a 49er comeback without Joe tonight? Well, George Seifert certainly hopes that that's not needed. You know what he said this week? If the Super Bowl were tonight, this team wouldn't be ready. It needs to be more consistent on defense and running the ball. Back to Chris Myers after this.
NFL Prime Monday is brought to you by Dodge. The more things change, the more things look like the new Dodge.
Under the top in New Orleans, Morton Anderson, who has scored in 169 straight games. For a while, everyone said he's the Saints' offense. He's second behind Jim Breach, who scored in 186 straight games. Some final thoughts now before the kickoff back to the Superdome and back to Chris Myers.
Moments ago, the Saints fans here in the East End Zone cheered on 49er linebacker Ricky Jackson. He, of course, played most of his career here with the Saints, and this week traded words with Jim Moore in the newspaper about his exit from New Orleans. As for Moore's future, a Saints official told us that he has a year to go on his contract, and Jim Moore's job is safe. The Saints, a team in transition, the 49ers on their way to another 10-win season. That's it from New Orleans. Back to Mike in the studio.
All right, Chris, we'll see you on SportsCenter if the game runs at least a decent amount of time. Tune on over after the game. Dan Patrick, Keith Olbermann, and Chris will join them with interviews from the Superdome. Some final thoughts tonight?
Final thoughts. Can you believe it? The 49ers got another good football player. Tim Harris is back in the fold this week. Just what they need, another good pass rusher. This week in practice, the coaches and the players said nobody could block this guy in practice. He's ready to go. Look for him to come in, make an impact on 3rd down in those passing situations.
Yeah, going to stick my neck way out on that 49er limb and assume that they're going to be in the red zone a few times tonight against the Saints. Jerry Rice has told me that the one unstoppable pattern, that little quick slant inside, puts himself between the ball and the defender, a la basketball player Steve Young delivers. Look for a safety to come over, anticipate that big hit or the INT deep in the red zone.
Well, TJ, last week the Rams showed me that 49er defense can be exploited. And the way Jim Everett is playing, now with the addition of Mario Bates and a solid running attack, I'll say I'm going to go on the line tonight and pick the Saints in this one, Mike.
Oh, wow. Well, we'll see what happens, Ronnie. Yeah. Hey, a reminder, there's a Thursday night game this week, and it's right here. The battle for first in the NFC Central. Minnesota hosting the Bears. Steve Walsh, will he go 8-0 as a starter? Preceding that game, Boomer, TJ, and the guys, the NFL Tonight at 7:30. So join them then. Up next, Canadian football. Last night's Grey Cup Finals. Enjoy it. I'm Mike Tirico. Thanks for watching Prime Monday. Bye-bye.